Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the Commonwealth News. As always, I'm your host, Daniel, and we got my co-host, Laurence, alongside me.
Hello.
Say hello, thank you. You can follow me on any social media, Daniel_TBCC, and you can also follow Laurence at Laurence_TBCC. And today is a special episode. Why is it a special episode?
Wow, it's a very special episode because we have a new host with us today.
We do. His name is Simon, and I'm going to introduce you right now. Say hello, Simon.
Hello, it's fantastic to be with you here on the Commonwealth News. I'm a big fan of the show and love everything.
Big fan, long-time listener?
Long-time listener for the 5 episodes that precede this one.
That's good. It's good to have you along. You're going to bring some intelligence and some insight into our show. No offense to you. No offense, Laurence. But yeah, it's just going to bring something in as well. So it's good. We're looking forward to this episode. So in this episode, we got Ted Yarbrough on, who's a fantastic guest, and we talk about the new AUKUS Defence Pact. We're also going to cover our main topic tonight is the UK.
Marmite?
No, it's not Marmite. It's the UK Strategic Defence Plan, and Simon's going to come in on that. He's an expert in the field, so it's going to be all good with him there. No, you're shaking your head, but I'm sure it's going to be fine. And we've also going to start with, of course, our top 3 stories of recent time. Number 1 is the Insulate Britain protesters. What have you guys been thinking?
Don't get me started. Well, actually, now I've got me started.
I was going to say the whole point is I'm trying to get you started.
Right, like a couple of times, annoying, but fair enough. But now it's just irritating, isn't it? It's and people, as you say, I think just people are getting fed up, and passengers. Should I say passengers? Pedestrians, whatever you want to call them. Just dragging them out the way now, aren't they? They're getting fed up with it.
Yes, yeah. So we're going to come to that video just shortly. They were holding up. Not was it only just a queue, and obviously we've seen recently there was a stroke victim who wasn't able to get to hospital, and the damages that may have caused to them is, well, we don't know yet. They could cause some serious damages. But in this recent video, they actually were holding up an ambulance, and you can see the paramedic actually trying to urge them to move out the way. And in the end, some pedestrians, well, I think they're also drivers of vehicles nearby, got a bit fed up with them. So if we just flick over to that, you can actually hear them saying there's an ambulance there.
He's waiting to get by. What fucking stupid question is that?
Beep.
He's asking if he's waiting to get by. There's a fucking ambulance, you stupid prick. Get out the road.
You'll see the paramedic come on in just a second. There he is. Did you hear that? Was that an RTC he's got to go to? And then they literally just drag him on the way. And you can see, I mean, that is a bad state to be in, is when you're getting dragged out of the way. But did you see this little guy who's just been thrown then? He was crawling back onto the road. Like, it's just humiliating for them involved.
I honestly think now it's got to the stage where they should just make it classed as a terrorist organisation.
Well, the police are going to come down. They're going to come down much harder on it now, which is good. Obviously, the police aren't here at this point. I don't know whether the video's just started, so I don't know whether they had just arrived there or not.
Yeah, because they're supposed to have passed an injunction now, so should have large fines and a prison sentence. I mean, I'm biased on this. I'm against all forms of organised protest.
What, is it like this?
Yes, can't stand it all. It's, when the civil servant strikes and not getting generous enough pensions, or I just don't like organised protest. Mm-hmm. But why do you have to block the M25 if you want insulated homes? I mean, I get it's sort of mass disruption, but
well, the whole point is actually flawed, because the government are insulating homes, so they're doing a massive rollout scheme to local governments, unitary governments, to give them a load of money which they can put into their council house and stock to insulate those. Any of the ones that aren't doing very well when it comes to the environment and eco-friendly. And of course, they had the Green Home Scheme, which was a great grant that any private person can actually get for their home, and they could have used that to insulate their homes. So this whole thing is based on a false principle that the government aren't insulating Britain, which is completely untrue.
Yeah,
so they're
definitely.
holding up people for no reason.
Well, and they're pushing against an open door, really. I mean, the government's legislated to be net zero by 2050. And so really at the moment, you need constructive debate in order to think, how can we sustainably get to net zero rather than just mass disruption, huge tailbacks, diesel engines, running all the while. No one is saying that our homes don't need to be insulated. In fact, you say we had the Green Homes Grant and there's a replacement coming out soon. So, they're pushing against an open door.
But also what they're doing is annoying basically
everyone
in the public. And what we're seeing now is what we saw against Extinction Rebellion when it stopped people getting to work and people just fed up with it. It's affecting their livelihoods and people are getting fed up with it, aren't they?
But the thing is, we're already doing it. What they're demanding is already being done. And it's not like it's being done solely. The Green Homes Grant scheme was active last year. So they're completely out of touch with what's going on. It's completely unacceptable. But that brings us on to topic number 2. And our topic number 2 is we've tried to branch out. So this one's the UK-based news. Topic number 2 is international. Now, I don't know if probably no one's ever heard of him, is Peter Nygård. He's a fashion mogul. He's going to be extradited to the US based on he's facing charges of sex trafficking and racketeering. So, any thoughts, guys? Any thoughts on this?
So where is he currently? Where?
I don't know where he's
Canada,
residing.
isn't he?
Right.
I believe so. So yeah, it's apparently decades-long pattern of criminal conduct involving at least a dozen victims in the US, Canada, and other countries. So apparently there's quite a lot of people who are affected by this. So his lawyer, Brian Greenspan, so he consented to that extradition, so that he could contest the charges. So in December 2020, the indictment by US officials in the Southern District of New York alleges Mr. Nygård used force, fraud, and coercion. Coercion. Thank you very much. To engage in sexual activity with adults and minors. Officials also accuse him of using his company's influence, resources to recruit and maintain many more victims. He's Finnish Canadian, and he's multi-millionaire. He stepped down as chairman last year of the Nygård International and Global Women's Apparel business. He stepped down because he was getting investigated by the FBI task force for child exploitation.
Oh. That's why Simon's here to do all the pronunciations, isn't he, really?
Yes.
So did you say he's finished being a Canadian or he's a Finnish Canadian?
No, he's a Finnish Canadian. He's not finished being Canadian. He's a Finnish Canadian. Topic number 3 is New Zealand Judith Collins. She said the UK has left the door open. And this was as a result of the AUKUS agreement. So what was the UK left the door open? Well, apparently, the UK has left the door open for China in the Indo-Pacific region. Now, I think creating a defense plan which goes against China, like we're bolstering the countries that are being affected by China, which is Australia, of course, I would say that we're not leaving the door open. In fact, we're trying to shut the door. Yeah.
I think this sort of speaks to a broader sense of dissatisfaction, though. Often in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, when we joined the European Union, we turned our back in terms of trade, to many of our Commonwealth partners. And I think that sense of resentment is still very much so there. If you speak to Australians about it, you very much get that sense that we did turn our back on them. And I think this is what the leader of the opposition was referring to, in that our joining the European Union, turning our backs on the rest of the world and having a very Eurocentric view of what our foreign policy should be, it has sort of left the door open, so to speak, for China
as in saying in the past. Obviously, now so. With global Britain moving forward, global Britain, it's looking much better.
Yeah, whatever that means.
Well, I believe you're going to go into a bit of that later on. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, yeah. Nice. So, Laurence, I believe we are playing your game now. So we're playing Guess the Headline with Laurence, with your favourite quizmaster, Laurence Marshall.
There we go. I've made favourite in bold this week.
Lovely.
There we go. So I'm sure you've seen this, Simon. But
A great fan of the
finally get to
segment.
play along now. Cool. So yeah, you got to guess the headline, and then at the end we've got something slightly different to talk about. So let's go with the first one. Turkey, missing man joins blank.
Ooh. Oh, I actually know this one. I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in. He joins the search of looking for himself.
That is right.
I was going to go for the London Marathon.
No, that is right. So apparently his family reported him missing.
Yes, that's a point to me. Thank you very
Was
much.
believed to be missing on Tuesday. He had wandered away from his friends in a forest while drunk, according to the Daily website. His wife and friends reported him missing after they were unable to get in touch with him for several hours.
Yes.
He later joined in a group in an area who were helping authorities search for him. When members of the search party began calling out his name, he replied, "I am here." From a comedy, that, isn't it? Okay, next one then. Funeral home sponsored advert urging people blank.
To take dangerous life choices.
Well, might be along the might be along the right sort of lines there.
Start smoking.
Yeah.
Oh, any
Just
ideas?
anything that helps them. I don't know. I couldn't possibly.
Not to get vaccinated.
Oh goodness!
Don't get
course.
vaccinated.
Wow.
So, but there is a bit of a twist to this. So, actual fact, on their website, if you go to the website, it says "Get vaccinated now.
Wow.
If not, we'll see you soon." So it's a sort of a ploy to get people vaccinated. But I thought it was quite a good headline, actually.
Shocking.
Okay, next one. Blank could be the scariest costume at this Halloween.
Hillary Clinton.
Ooh, close.
I saw that costume. What was the? There's a ride on Queen Elizabeth
No.
costume. Is it that?
What?
Because I saw that and was like, what?
I'm not sure what I know about that.
Oh, Kim Jong Un,
No,
Donald Trump,
no.
President Biden.
Sexy Bernie Sanders outfit.
No,
That is horrifying.
no way. Is that actually?
He looks nothing like Bernie Sanders.
It's meant to be. Yeah, like, it's meant to be like coat, isn't it? It's like
He's cuckoo.
wow,
Crazy, isn't it?
sexy Bernie Sanders. Yeah,
Those two words you wouldn't really have together, would you? Unless it was like
it
not.
must have been at least 40 or 50 years since he's last heard that.
Right, couple charged blank after reviewing CCTV.
Ooh. Couple charge.
Is it a D, so couple charged with indecent exposure after reviewing CCTV?
Oh. Is it?
No.
No.
Couple charged guests for eating extra slice of wedding cake after reviewing CCTV.
How tight-fisted
no
can
way.
you get?
Wow. Couple charge guests for eat an extra slice of wedding cake. Wow. £3.66.
I'll tell you what, if people did that to me at weddings, I'd probably be in debt. So,
Yeah, I can see.
Yeah. Cheeky. Beep. Right, next one then. Headline 5. Woman charged $11 for blank during medical procedure.
Farting.
No, you should be charged more than that though. Depends what the medical procedure is though. I mean,
Pissing.
it's not pooing either. So,
Oral.
I don't like where this is going.
No.
Woman charged £11 for emotional distress after crying during
wow.
medical procedure.
Brief emotion. That's even worse. It's worse when you can see it on there. Brief emotion.
Yeah, an American woman says she's been charged $11 after crying during a mole removal surgery. The charge was categorised as showing brief emotion.
Imagine what it would have been if she'd shown a long-standing emotion or something like that.
Crazy, isn't it?
Brief emotion.
You probably don't get charged in the NHS, I guess. Yeah.
Brief emotion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anger.
Anger.
Anger. £20.
So that's the headlines, but so
I love the way she got £2.20 discount on her brief emotion though.
maybe that's because it's not VAT or whatever they pay over there. I don't know.
Not
So the next one, I don't know if any of our viewers are on TikTok. I'm sure they are. But there's quite a going on at the moment. I don't know if you've seen this. Couch Guy.
You can actually follow us on TikTok.
You can.
Commonwealth.
How would they find us?
Commonwealth News.
Commonwealth News. Now, interesting to see what you guys think. So this has had when I last checked, had over 51 million views. Some people standing up for the guy. Some people are, having a go in. So let's watch the video. Oh, I haven't got any sound.
Turn off your sound. Do we need sound to know what's going on?
Sorry, you don't need sound. So what people are saying basically is she's travelled all this way to surprise him, and he doesn't look very surprised at all, and he's there obviously with 3 girls. I've watched it over and again. I can't see much of a problem, but people are saying, if we watch that again...
Have we just wasted 30 seconds of our life? In fact, are we about to waste a minute of our life now because you're playing it again?
Do you think there's anything suspicious there? Because millions of people are saying there is.
So we're just watching a video of a girlfriend going and...
So she's basically gone on this way. So people are saying that
Laurence, this is meant to be a professional news show, and you have shown us this not once, may I add,
twice.
You've shown us it twice now.
But it's
all
had
of our
over
viewers.
51 million views. So what is people seeing in this view that we're not seeing?
To be honest, I think it sums up the majority of the content on TikTok. Not us. We have we post clips of our podcast on there, so of course it's very valuable. However, quality. This is junk, and I do not appreciate you showing.
But what I'm saying is, can you see any issue with what this guy's done?
I can't.
So why?
I can't.
So where's the problem there?
I don't know. I mean, to me, it's 51 million views. That's 25 million minutes.
We're not watching that again.
He was live. They're not going to get back.
I think what it's saying is he wasn't that impressed that she was there.
You
she
have
travelled all this way. He wasn't that impressed. I mean, I'd probably be a bit more.
You have wasted 3 minutes nearly of our life with this rubbish.
But people have watched it over and over again. 51 million
Including
views.
you.
Yeah.
You know
I've
what?
watched it because I'm trying to watch it to work out what people
Laurence,
are going on about. That's what I'm watching it for.
On that note, we're going to move on to our guest interview. I'm sorry, we're moving on. Hello, so today's guest is Ted Yarbrough, who is the founder and editor of Daily Globe. So we're going to start with a very broad question. What are your views on AUKUS agreement? Do you support it? If so, why?
Hi, hello. Thank you for having me on your podcast. Just say that out of the way. I'm an admirer of you all. I enjoy listening. In terms of the AUKUS agreement, I think it's very welcome. I think China needs to be contained. And right now, we just have a situation to where they are belligerent. I mean, you probably saw what happened in Taiwan yesterday when they were sending all these airplanes into Taiwanese airspace. There was and what they did to Australia last year was outrageous. Australia was just asking for the WHO to determine the origins of the coronavirus, and China effectively put economic blockade against Australia. We actually interviewed on the Daily Globe's podcast last year, Emily Dye from Australia, and she went into that in detail, talking about how Australian products were rotting in Chinese ports. If China is not going to behave like a civilized nation, it's up to English-speaking, or not even English-speaking, but countries that believe in freedom to band together. And what better example than at least for the start, I'd like to include countries like India in the future and Canada.
Yes.
But for now, the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia banding together to at least contain China in the Pacific is a very welcome step.
Yep. So you were telling me the other day about India's ship building. Well, with the boat building, submarine building. Yeah, they're doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, they're halfway through their new fleet of submarines, aren't they?
They're building a fleet of nuclear submarines, correct?
Aren't they nuclear powered ballistic submarines?
Nuclear powered ballistic submarines.
Yeah, for Australia, they are building.
No, India.
India, yes, they are as well. India, I consider kind of a big great hope for this century, and I would like to see them involved. I know they're already involved in another agreement with the United States. I believe they're part of the Quad with Japan and the United States. But I think that India is going to be, in terms of containing China, is going to be very key. They're a Commonwealth ally. Of course, they have a thriving democracy. They have a military that's rapidly modernizing, as you point out. And I mean, in the next century, I could see them rather than China being the great power. And for the sake of freedom, I kind of hope they are.
Yes, absolutely.
China is is obviously bad, but China has a lot of issues that people don't refer to. They have a demographic crisis. Their one-child policy for years wasn't smart. Now, President Xi has gotten rid of it, but it took 30 years. When I'm having 3 men to every woman for 30 years, that ended up being a problem. China's debt is more than 250% of its GDP. They're expanding into a lot of countries that are not, I know China thinks that they're building an empire, and they are. I mean, in terms of areas like copper and a lot of natural resources, but they're also making a lot of bad investments in parts of Africa that is money sinkhole. Parts of Central Asia the same way. Places in Europe like Serbia, they're trying to put in their claws. So it's important to go back to the original. This AUKUS is a good first step, but including Singapore and the wider India and the wider Commonwealth, I think, is very important, because what's great about the Commonwealth is you have built in an alliance right there. You just need the countries to agree. Fortunately, there's some, like, say, New Zealand recently, like Jacinda Ardern seems to be kind of soft on China, but you have a shared values and shared goals already in place with the Commonwealth. And, of course, we want the U.S. to be involved as well, being that they are still the world superpower. I think the Commonwealth is going to be key to containing China and other kind of belligerents in the 21st century. And that's what military needs to be an area that's discussed more. I know that trade is very important, but what's so welcome about AUKUS is it shows what I think is going to be a 21st century needed alliance, because frankly, NATO, I don't know what NATO serves. I mean, it serves some purpose, I guess, to contain Russia, but the real threat isn't Russia anymore, it's China. And so that's where I think the Commonwealth could definitely come in.
Integrated Defence Review and the Indo-Pacific tilt, recognizing that China is the rising threat to Western and European interests. I think often Western, particularly European countries, have been pretty slow to wake up to the fact that Russia is not our only adversary now. Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at it, what I thought was really interesting and was very welcome, the new Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, when she talked about our allies, Britain's allies, in her speech, she talked specifically about countries like, she said the Commonwealth by name, she said the United States. She did mention some countries in Europe, but she didn't mention France, Germany, or the European Union. And I know that was supposedly not intentional, but it probably was. And the reason for that being is, Germany especially wanted to ram through an agreement between the European Union and China. I don't know what interest, if they have at all, in maintaining any kind of Western alliance. I think that the truth is, when India has 1 billion people and when its economy is going to be the size of the European Union's in 50 years, that's really who we need to be dealing with and focusing on. And Australia, too, is important, of course. Also, and I've mentioned this before in my writing for years, and others, there's a great book called The Case for Commonwealth Free Trade by Brent Cameron, who writes on the Daily Globe. He's a Canadian counselor. But this is the future. And I'm really optimistic that we have with Liz Truss somebody, I think, who sees that. I don't know what Dominic Raab's view on it was, but he didn't say much other than Hong Kong was very good, but he didn't seem to have a big vision. What I like seeing with her was that alliance of liberty, I think was the word or network, of liberty. I think that's very encouraging. So we can build off AUKUS to building this network of liberty, and a key part of that being the Commonwealth, which is what's so cool about what organizations like you guys are talking about, is trying to build awareness for this. Because if people know about this in government, and obviously Liz Truss is on our wavelength. She does follow me on Twitter, which is really cool. Never gotten a like, really? But she does follow me.
Still time.
Yeah, but if we have people thinking like this, Britain really could be a leader, and that could really be the global Britain. And that's so elusive to some commentators to understand. And of course, I welcome the United States' involvement as well. But I think the U.S. The only concern with the U.S. right now, and living here and being an American, it's not quite. I'm not really quite sure how stable we are in our views. I mean, it seems to kind of alter dramatically between Biden and Trump, and whereas up until the 2000s, we all kind of had one view, the Cold War fighting. But right now, America seems to be kind of in flux. And if we were to get President AOC, theoretically, that would
not.
throw, hopefully not, but that would throw a wrench in it. And, if Trump came back, it's interesting to see where America would be. But I think if building the Commonwealth now, free trade, as Brent Cameron pointed out, but also this military network of liberty, as Liz Truss could do, could really set the stage for good 21st century foreign policy.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting. I'm quite concerned about China's aggressiveness, especially we've spoken to an Australian MP who's expressed concern about their advancement in the South China Seas and the fact that they're kind of concreting over everything, creating airfields.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a bit of a concern with the way that they are in the mountain ranges with India as well.
Yeah,
there's reports of quite odd, but hand-to-hand combat fighting between the two armies.
Yeah, 25,000 feet.
yeah, exactly. I think it's the politicians need to start turning and looking at China more. We spend too much time focusing on Russia now, like you said. It's time to actually look at the other threats that are across the globe. More recently, there's reports, not official reports yet, but there are still reports that China potentially has taken over one of the airfields in Afghanistan. I don't know if you've seen this.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that concern there as well, that they're palling up with the Taliban.
Yeah, I think they're likely to. I think that, and like I said, some of their decisions are bad investments. I mean, frankly, but Afghanistan, I think, would be a good investment for them because, unfortunately, Afghanistan has, I believe, the world's largest deposit of lithium mines.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, and since the West, for whatever, because we are, I guess, the whole West seems to be committed to net zero. We're going to be very dependent on those.
Absolutely.
That and copper. And so that's very concerning, that to have China in control of such a large deposit of minerals that, we don't really
get. The world needs.
Yeah, that the world needs. I'm hoping that other technology will come around where we don't have to be dependent on that, but it would be really too bad to switch from being dependent upon OPEC to show what they did. When they were in control of the oil supplies for decades, to switch to now China, who are, I think is worse than Saudi Arabia and, worse than Russia, and some of these other more belligerent actors that we dealt with in OPEC and still deal with to a certain extent. I mean, you look at what you're seeing with the gas issue in Britain and Western Europe generally, depending on Russia, because Britain doesn't want to use coal anymore, which is fine, except that you're paying the Russians.
We become dependent on essentially our adversaries. So it's not great.
And one thing America did do well, I know that environmentalists, most of them would disagree with this, but when we started fracking, that really saved us our energy costs, and we don't have to deal with this situation. But we don't want to be in a situation like what Western Europe is now to Russia, the whole world to China, and that's why it's important that we build as strong of an alliance as possible throughout the Commonwealth, especially also considering that there are natural resources throughout Commonwealth nations as well that can be greatly utilized. There is a lot of lithium in Central Africa, for instance, but we have to be hard-headed right now. And I feel like right now, maybe since the Cold War is over, or maybe the focus on war or terror, our foreign policy kind of went to sleep and didn't really think about hard-headed things like controlling resources, controlling supply chains. So that's why AUKUS is a step in the right direction. Frankly, putting a stop to China's at least hard-headedness in the Pacific.
Do you think we're going into another Cold War with China?
I think we are. I mean, it's a different Cold War than with Russia, in the sense that Russia, we didn't really buy a lot from Russia. The Soviet Union didn't make anything of use besides nuclear weapons or something. I mean, they were an economically backwards superpower. But with China, unfortunately, we do trade a lot with. I'd like to not trade with them, but they make really cheap stuff. So we all buy from them.
They control a lot of the production.
Yeah, they do. So we're in a different type of Cold War, in a sense.
All of our COVID tests, they all came from China. All of our masks, they all were produced in China. So they control a lot of our production.
Oh, no, that antibiotics are made in China. So if China really wanted to, they could create a lot of disruption. Now, obviously, a hot war wouldn't benefit China because their economy would fall apart. But China has been smarter than the Soviet Union, in the sense when they saw the Soviet Union collapse, they allowed for free enterprise to a certain extent. Now, granted, what the Chinese system is really not communism, it's fascism. Meaning fascism is nationalist socialism. In China, if you're allowed very little to no regulations to build your business. It's just you have to have government, maybe somebody on the board, maybe the government owns part of your things. Like look at Huawei, for instance. That is a private company, but the guy who founded it was in the Chinese military, and so he has connections. And so that their economic model is almost identical to.
I believe they have
Germany
two members of the party sat on the board as well, don't they?
Oh yeah, and that's pretty much every large corporation in China, because I think the Chinese government knows, well, we can't really run these corporations ourselves like the Soviets did, but we can watch what they're doing. And that's what the Nazis did as well. That's what the Italian fascists did to a lesser success. But like Volkswagen, for instance, and some of these corporations that were around in Nazi Germany.
Yeah, to go with Volkswagen.
Yeah, and the Chinese government is effectively like I said, it's a fascist economic model, but it's a lot more successful than a traditional Marxist model where, you look at a place like Venezuela or the old Soviet Union, there's a very limit to what you can achieve with the old Marxist model. So China's been smart in that regard.
Yes. Yeah, I can agree with that. So obviously we know you're a writer and you do a lot of writing. So what are you currently doing to advocate for AUKUS, for like stronger ties amongst the countries?
Yeah, on the Daily Globe, there is a organization called the Commonwealth Realms CANZUK campaign. Mm-hmm. It was founded by Isaac Anderson, also a writer on the Daily Globe, and we have a section on there which has had lots of articles on different CANZUK and Commonwealth issues. Another way is to promote your own podcast, which we have been very big fans on, and I've been speaking, and I hope that there will be greater collaboration between our two organizations.
We really appreciate what you do at the moment.
Yeah, as time goes on, I'd like to write more than I do. I used to write probably more, but just had my second child, and I'm a practicing lawyer. And well thank you. So very busy at the moment, but there's such great energy and excitement. I was disappointed that the certain international organization has maybe not been as supportive of the movement generally as we would like. But we don't want to talk about them too much.
No, we don't want to talk about them at all.
No. But I think that one thing that is very encouraging is there's a couple organizations that I think are worth us all supporting, and one of them is Conservative Friends of the Commonwealth. There's a writer in the Daily Globe called Nicholas Morris. He's from Trinidad and Tobago, and he's been very involved in it. But it seems to be gaining a lot of support in the Conservative Parliamentary Party. Of course, unfortunately, the Canadian Conservatives lost the election, but they are pushing for greater Commonwealth ties. There is a group of UK MPs called the All Parliamentary Group for CANZUK.
Yes,
and they have some good ones that I like, a lot of MPs. One of them I've interviewed, Andrew Rosendale, but there was another one that I was surprised to see Layla Mora in that group. I thought she was an arch Europhile, but maybe she thinks CANZUK is the next best thing to being an arch Europhile. I don't know. So there's a lot of things happening. My understanding, I mean, the free trade agreement with Australia is great. My understanding is there's going to be one with New Zealand.
Yeah, they're tying it together.
Yeah, there is one with Canada, which could be better, which my understanding is they're trying to make it better. I mean, unfortunately, Trudeau, I think that he has, my understanding, at least going back to his father, he has more sympathy with the Francophonie than the Commonwealth. But I
still
think
shocked he won, actually, considering his party antics we've all seen.
Yeah,
what he used to dress up as.
Yeah, what's strange is about him is his popularity is in the 30s, and for the second election in a row, he got less votes in total than the Conservative Party of Canada. Which, of course, if this was in America, which we've seen when Republicans get less votes than Democrats and win, it's an outrage. But if conservatives get more votes than liberals, then it's not. But my understanding is that, unfortunately, the conservative vote was just very concentrated in certain places, like Alberta, Saskatchewan, parts of British Columbia, and parts of Ontario, where they win 70% of the vote. Whereas liberals would just pick off these little wins, along. And that's the other problem. Canada has a very strange system with Atlantic Canada, for instance, has, I guess, something like the representation is not equal. So in Alberta, the amount of representatives per one person, there's a lot more people per one representative than there is in Atlantic Canada. For whatever reason, my understanding, it was grandfathered in to try to keep these provinces more represented because they're older. But they have a strange electoral system, which doesn't seem very democratic, but it is what it is. And unfortunately, Trudeau is hanging around. He may be a dead man walking politically. I mean, he's tried twice to win a majority and hasn't. He's not popular, but he's still hanging around, unfortunately. And I would like to see him participate, and obviously Canada participate in something like AUKUS. But I just don't know if he would do it. I mean, frankly, he's not as like, he doesn't have as much love for China, if that's not the right word, but he doesn't. Jacinda Ardern seems to be pretty pro having a good relationship with China. I wouldn't say Canada wants to have a great relationship with China, but I don't know if they're ready to be, standing up.
They're not exactly splitting away. So we were informed by one of the Canadian MPs who we interviewed about the fact that Trudeau went and purchased all the vaccines he wanted, all the vaccines that was going to go to Canada. He purchased them from China, only for China to turn around and say, actually, you're not going to have them in the end. So I don't know if he's learned his lesson there. Yeah.
They're bad. Like, if you look at the efficiency of the Sinovac, I mean, Chile, of all places, bought a bunch of Chinese vaccines, and it was like 20% efficiency.
It's not very good.
What else would you expect from a country that just steals everybody's intellectual property? It's not going to be as good as the ones where they actually invent it, like the United States. It's always a
slightly cheaper, not as good version, isn't it?
Yeah. So why would you? That's not surprising, but that also is not surprising and is unfortunate about what Trudeau would want to buy from them first, when his allies in Great Britain, obviously AstraZeneca, and then in America, the Pfizer and the Moderna. So that's disappointing.
Very disappointing. I believe Simon's got a question for you. He looks puzzled. It's his first time on.
Sure.
He's our new co-host.
Cool.
Sorry about that. Where do you see AUKUS within the sort of wider strategy of NATO in the Indo-Pacific?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I want to go back to what we were saying about NATO and say that I didn't want to give the impression that I don't think NATO is not needed, but I think that NATO is a relic in the sense that it was designed to contain Russia, which Russia does still need to be contained. I mean, Russia is going to mess around on the Ukrainian borders, and it is going to mess around in the Baltic states.
They are still looking there, aren't they?
Yeah, they're still going to jack up gas prices on Western Europe. But in terms of the greater strategy, I think that AUKUS is more the future and NATO's the past. And what I mean is NATO it's right to have NATO. But instead of NATO being the focus, I think organizations like AUKUS and then hopefully the Commonwealth or this quote unquote Quad and other organizations will take a bigger role for countries like the United States and the United Kingdom and countries. And then NATO would take it would be a lesser alliance. And that happens in history. I mean, used to be Britain focused more on the East than on the West. The European Union Economic Community wasn't really, an issue in the 50s. And even in the 60s, it was seen as something that the Americans kind of put together so the West wouldn't become communist. And then over time, when Britain started losing its empire, they gave up they stopped the focus on east of Aden, and then they joined the EEC. And so now it's kind of just reverting to back, I think, previous strategy, which is to more focus on the world beyond Europe. And I think that's what's going to happen in the 21st century, which makes only sense when India and China are likely to be the two dominant powers. Can you see?
Yeah, we got you again now.
Yeah.
Carry on where you were. Sorry.
Oh, I was just saying that long story short, I don't know where you lost me, so I don't want to repeat
around the time of decolonization and focus on Europe as part of our foreign policy.
Yeah, I mean, in the past, Britain changed its foreign policy to focus on Europe rather than the East, because they wanted to join the EEC and they lost the empire, and they thought that would be the way to be a stronger country in the future, maybe being the bridge between Europe and Australia, and the United States. But I think now NATO, yes, it's going to be used, but it's going to be a secondary. It's going to be secondary because the realities of the 21st century is that India and China and maybe others in the East, but definitely those two are going to be the dominant powers.
Absolutely.
So earlier on we quickly spoke about about Afghanistan and that. So what's the overall views on how it was handled by the Biden administration? And basically,
are you talking about in the United States?
Yeah, United States, and obviously it was quite here in the press. It was obviously quite hard, obviously, of how they came out, sort of just almost abandoned, didn't they, people in Afghanistan? So what sort of the views over there, I guess, and how Biden's.
Yeah, I think with anything in America, you have to be, it's hard to say what Americans think, because there are really two different Americas, in the sense that one America, there's the mainstream media, which is universally supports the Democrats. Right. And so they don't really report negative things about Democrats. It's very rare that they do. Conversely, if you were to listen to, say, talk radio or Fox News or, maybe some right-wing sites, they're almost universally critical of the Democrats. So it's hard to find out what your man on the street thinks. But from my views of polling and talking to people, I think most people are kind of embarrassed by it. It was pathetic that we gave up all that military hardware. I mean, I'm one that I'm not really sure what I was kind of confused what our objective was in Afghanistan after removing the Taliban. And for 20 years, it was never really explained to us. Frankly, I'm one of the few people that thought Iraq made a lot more sense. It's in the heart of the Middle East. There is oil there. It's an important nation. They had an educated population. Afghanistan's illiteracy is one of the highest in the world. I wasn't really clear what we were doing there. But to withdraw like we did in just spectacular fashion, leave all of our guns behind and give it to this lunatic terrorist organization.
Not just guns, vehicles, APCs, which are personnel carriers, helicopters. You've seen the video of the Black Hawk flying above there.
Yeah, it almost seems like it would have been quicker just to give them that at the beginning, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Just to
and save us trillions of dollars or whatever we spent.
Thousands of lives,
Yeah, so I think that most Americans are, from what I can tell, are unhappy about it. But again, it's tough to tell because we have such a media that, is universally, like I said, the majority of the media is going to universally cheer on Biden regardless of what he does. and any Democrat for that matter. They don't report really anything negative about Democrats at all. And then on the other side, it's always going to be negative. So it's hard to figure it out.
You need that middle ground, don't you? You need that middle ground.
We do, and we just don't really have. I mean, we have, like, say, the Wall Street Journal, I think, is probably the best. They have a right-leaning editorial stance, but not, like eagles flying and a big flag. I mean, they have a pretty measured way of thinking about it. But if you read the New York Times, you might as well just pick up Pravda. I mean, that's what it is.
Because it is funny, though, isn't it? Like, we've seen things that Trump did, and he got absolutely stated for it, and then Biden's almost gone and done some of the same things, and it's sort of like he's almost a hero for doing the same sort of thing. And you're thinking, oh, hang on a minute, where's the middle ground media that's supposed to be reporting on?
Where's the fairness?
Yeah, and it's bizarre because, like, in Britain, there is, of course, the chattering classes will remain, but you had the Times, the Sunday Times backed Brexit, but even though the Times during the weekday was pro-Remain, you had sides for both. And, you did have, like, your Guardian, and BBC was biased, but you also, on the other hand, had a lot of media that was, like, pro-Brexit, whereas any mainstream media outlet, any establishment media outlet, like I said, the exception maybe being the Wall Street Journal, is just rabidly propaganda. And so you like, I used to listen to NPR a lot, which is kind of like sort of like a mini BBC. It's owned by the government. Well, not owned by the government, but it's taxpayer funded. And it used to have a lot of interesting stories. The whole point of it is similar ones to BBC. Well, they make stuff that people commercially wouldn't be interested in. Yeah. But really, since Trump, I have a hard time listening. And I'm not like the world's biggest Trump fan, but like everything was just relentless propaganda.
Just constant, wasn't it? Just this is this and this and this is bad. What are you going to acknowledge the peace deals amongst the Middle East? No, they didn't want to acknowledge it. No,
they never acknowledge it. They still find some problem with it, and if they report on it at all.
Yeah. Well, they did, didn't they? They did report on it and said that it was. I did see one report about one of the Israeli peace deals, and they just said it was a threat. It was a threat. Sure, and I was like, how is that a threat? It's a peace deal.
They probably interviewed like a member of Hamas and claimed that was like a neutral person.
Yeah, exactly.
And also, you forget he brought North Korea to the table as well, didn't you? I mean,
yes, first US president since the war. Is it since the war? First president ever to step foot in North Korea, yeah.
Yeah.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems with American politics, you almost have... you seem to have the Democrats getting elected, then you seem to have the Republicans and back to them. It seems to almost be, whereas sort of in England, the Conservatives have been in for quite a while, haven't they? It seems to be almost, I don't know.
You're saying there's a bit more back and forth?
Yeah, it seems to be with who gets elected sort of party-wise, whereas the Conservatives have been quite a while and you've got obviously Labour who try and get in, but in the American politics, it seems it's always...
Yeah, it's very topsy-turvy. Yeah, it is. And I think that's because... well, there's 45% of people who will vote one way regardless on both sides. So there's really only 10%. And they switch because generally they don't like what the other party does, whoever's in power. And I would imagine this would be the type of person that, say, voted for Biden and then is a little unhappy with Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And then they'll vote for the Republicans. And then they'll see. And these people, this 10%, generally doesn't pay a lot of attention usually. But they'll get mad about something, and then they'll vote one way, and then the next time they'll switch back again. It is kind of strange, but I don't know why a third party has never taken root. I guess Britain really hasn't either. I mean, Labour was, and then they replaced the Liberals. But here, there's no equivalent of the Liberal Democrats. I mean, there's the Greens, but they're tiny. There's the Libertarians, who I voted for once, 2016. But, they can't really win. So I think a lot of people are just, all right, well, if I'm on this side of the political spectrum, I'll just vote for this party regardless. And then, so for the very few in the middle, they're just kind of persuaded to switch every 4 years. It's kind of weird. I don't know many people like that switch every 4 years, but they're out there, obviously, or else we wouldn't keep having these switches. Well, but they're never big. If you look at it, they're never big turns. They're only like, 2% here, 2% there. That makes a difference if a state goes one way or the other, if Congress is controlled one way or the other. So very few people switch, but the people that do have enormous power.
As can switch quite quickly. If you think about it, how long has Conservatives been in power for now?
Since 2010.
Yeah,
Since
so
2010s. So it's not that much longer, because obviously Obama was in for 8 years. Before that was Bush, wasn't it? So it's not that much longer. It's only one more cycle.
Though, haven't we?
Yeah, we've had a lot of elections in the last few years. So maybe that's why.
Congress switches back and forth a lot.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So right now the Democrats control it, but only with the skin of their teeth in the Senate. But it's actually tied.
The midterms are looking quite positive for the Republicans and quite negative for the Democrats from what I've seen so far.
Probably, but we got to.
And that's actually coming from some of the mainstream channels as well. I saw an article on CNN saying that they're quite worried about the midterms approaching, all the scandals they've already had already.
But they have a year, and of course, like with Hunter Biden, when they literally refused to let.
They blocked it on Twitter, didn't they? They blocked any articles about it.
And of course, there was a media blackout on our national news media.
That was regarding the laptop scandal, if anyone doesn't know. So I believe he took his laptop in somewhere to get repaired and didn't come back and claim it. And after X amount of time, it becomes the property of the owner of the laptop store. And they went through the hard drive and just found all these photos, just really incriminating photos. And when this became an article on the New York Post, it was just completely shut down by Twitter. Anyone posting it was getting banned for X amount of days, and it was just not being allowed to be shared around.
And Facebook. And none of the major news media reported on it. If they did, it was a right-wing crank conspiracy.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens in a year. I mean, that's what I was talking about earlier, though, with the U.S. foreign policy. It's kind of because it's so topsy-turvy, it's really unclear, long-term where America's going to be. I think you do have a little more stability in Commonwealth countries, at least for now. I mean, like I said, conservatives could fall apart and you could get Keir Starmer in there. Maybe somebody like Angela Rayner would be even worse.
Oh, gosh.
But it could happen. I mean, if the economy were to collapse, or, like for instance, I don't know how this, Boris committing to net zero, I don't know how sustainable it is. But as the people's energy bills keep going up,
they're going up next year.
Yeah, if people's taxes keep going up, which it seems to be, if people have to rip out their boilers and their heaters, I mean, that if inflation keeps going up, I mean, things could happen that change things in the UK as well.
I believe our fuel's likely to go up, isn't it? Our fuel's likely to go up to pay for subsidising, is it wind turbines? Is that what it was?
Yeah.
We've got some new green wind turbine subsidies, haven't we? And the price cap for our energy bills is just about to go up as well. So, as you said, things can quickly change.
Yeah.
It's often Scotland and Wales that determine our elections too.
Yep. Yeah, because if Scotland stopped voting SNP and started voting Labour, it would massively change the elections then, make it much closer.
Yeah, maybe they would if there was another second independence referendum and independence is defeated again. Then Scots might be, well, there's no point in voting for the SNP anymore.
Yeah,
I don't know.
We've got way away from the topic at hand. I just realized. I just suddenly thought, we were meant to be talking about AUKUS. So the one thing I wanted to ask about was, so obviously you're an advocate of free trade and stuff. Specifically, we've just obviously had Brexit. What do you think the UK should be pursuing in terms of free trade?
I want to refer back to, I think a trade deal with the US would be great, but I don't think Biden's going to want to do it.
I really want it. You can get cameras so much cheaper. We have a huge import on cameras, and it makes them very expensive.
Yeah, I mean, it would be great, but I think that Biden definitely doesn't want to do it. So at least for now, that's going to be shelved. But I think Commonwealth free trade, like I said, that Brent Cameron wrote in his book, is a good idea. I think we could already have CANZUK trade with free trade agreement with Australia, with New Zealand. I think a free trade agreement with India is more challenging, but definitely doable. And of course, that have to be in stages. I mean, I think that, it's not really my place, but I would think if India says we get free trade, but our students get to study over there, I think that's a good deal. Rather than having Chinese students, you have Indian students.
Yeah.
I think that one specific thing that I've written about is if besides Commonwealth free trade, which is Brent writes a really good book about, C5 and C9. C5 would be a free trade zone with free movement. And if you don't want to use that word, free movement of labor, not free movement of people, meaning you have to have a job to move. But between the US, UK, Australia, New Zealand, and Singapore. But if you look at it, the free trade deal with Australia does contain mobility, which is good. And then the C9 would be countries you do want free trade with, but not necessarily
movement kind of
movement right now, just because there's an economic disparity between the countries. But I would include Malaysia, South Africa, Nigeria, India. Those are, the two largest economies in Africa right there. You have India is, of course, going to be the largest economy in the world at some point, but it is one of the largest economies right now, 1 billion people. And Malaysia is actually the world's largest Kuala Lumpur, for instance, is the largest Islamic finance in the world. Kuala Lumpur is a fairly prosperous city. It's a former British colony. Malaysia, they speak English. Its economy is doing pretty well. And then eventually, I think you want to expand it to the entire Commonwealth. And of course, it's good to do free trade deals with countries outside of the Commonwealth as well. Japan is an easy one, which Liz Truss did a good job with. Taiwan, of course, that would provoke an enraged China, but I don't see any reason why you don't want to trade more with Taiwan. South Korea, of course. I believe the EU already has a deal with South Korea. I could be mistaken, though. Don't quote me on that.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah.
I think that's correct.
I think that's the largest country, the EU. Show how bad the EU is at free trade.
Yeah. But they don't allow countries to make their own trade deals, do they, as well?
Right. Yeah, that's why Britain could never make their own.
Big positives that come out of Brexit was being able to make these trade deals with other countries.
Yeah. So, and I think free trade generally means more world peace. It means more prosperous citizens. It means people by having cheaper products. Because I think that's the key to empowering people. And that's part of the goal that we always want. And with the Commonwealth, in the word Commonwealth, you want people to be able to buy a more cheaper camera if they want. You want people to buy more food, cheaper food. You want people to buy cheaper wine, Australian wine. You want people to be able to clothe their family, and you want people to have cheaper energy costs too, despite what the Green Lobby wants. And if you have that, then I think you have a more prosperous, happy people. And so that could be, going back to Liz Truss's network of liberty, a huge goal. And it's very encouraging to see. And, I hope that you guys keep going, is like talking about Commonwealth to keep pushing this. And, and we encourage people who want to write on this issue to come to the Daily Globe, and we are happy to accept written submissions. And another, of course, go to the mainstream ones, like the Telegraph is great on this. We wrote a letter to the Telegraph about the Commonwealth option a few years ago, with people that signatories included historian Andrew Roberts, for instance. But I think the other groups to get involved with, the Mallard in the UK is another good one that I think for getting the news out there. And they're good because they have such a strong, young conservatives seem to be based there. And of course, if you're not a conservative, then there's a writer with the Daily Globe named Luke Binney, who I believe is a liberal Democrat. But
yes, there's a liberal Democrat movement for CANZUK. It's relatively small now, because one of the comments we had was, why do you keep getting conservatives on? And it's just much easier to find conservatives supporting either CANZUK, AUKUS, or the Commonwealth as a whole. Yeah, it's just not as big amongst the left groups at the moment.
Yeah, and I think that's because the left, is unfortunately so steeped in identitarianism right now. But if they would see that if they're interested in multiculturalism, the Commonwealth is way more multicultural than the European Union.
Absolutely,
they need to get over that, and they need to look at. I know they're mad about Brexit, but that's the future. And so I'm happy that, like I said, the groups like yours are looking future. I'm happy that AUKUS came out. That's a future agreement. I think that Liz Truss's Network of Liberty is future looking. And I'm finally glad that what's so great about Brexit is it ends the navel gazing off one continent of the world and focuses on the entire world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We got to be reaching out with all of our, they're essentially all allies as it currently stands. Like, we're all good in good relationships. We should be building on it. I don't understand why we're not.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's beneficial for everyone in the end. And should we ever have escalating tensions with China even further, I think it's very important that we got all our friends nice and close.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So what we'll do, obviously we've had some technical errors, so I'm not quite sure how long we've been on the call for. But if we move to little closing questions where we ask some more personal stuff about you, is that all right? I don't know how long we got you.
Yeah, that's fine. Could we? I could go maybe 5 minutes. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we just asked you some personal questions about yourself then. So, number one, of course, is what do you do? What do you do in your spare time?
I'm an attorney.
Get spare time?
Not much.
That doesn't sound like spare time. That sounds like work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, for a spare time. Well, I have a great family here. I have a great group of friends. I like to bicycle and bike to work. That's rare in America, by the way. It's especially rare in Texas. But I'd like to do that. I like to travel. We've been to the United Kingdom many times. I've been to, including Northern Ireland, which is an interesting place. Gibraltar, Spain, Morocco, different places like that.
You've been around, yeah.
Yeah, Mexico is great if you ever get a chance to come in, or Belize, wonderful down here. I'm really into history, though, history and politics. I love reading The Spectator, for instance. I love reading books. I like to try to mix up fiction and nonfiction. And including, older books, newer books, because I think reading is, the most place that we can learn enough because I think the more we read, the better informed decisions we can make. And of course, talk and events like that. Share ideas, John Stuart Mill's Marketplace of Ideas, and there's no better way to do that than read as much as you can.
Absolutely. Can you pick off, I don't know, maybe a top, I'll give you 5 because it makes it easier, like your top favorite books, fiction / nonfiction?
Yeah, if you want to do, let's see, both. Okay.
Combine.
I'll name some known ones and some non-knowns just to mix it up. I love Charles Moore's recent biography of Margaret Thatcher. That's a 3-volume one. It's really good. Another one that I would recommend reading is kind of obscure book. It's called The Last Victorians, and it was made in like the 1920s. I got in an old used bookshop. That book was amazing. And it was by a guy who he was in Parliament at the same time as Disraeli and Salisbury. And he's very smart. But one thing that he did, what I really thought was interesting, going to our discussion today, he talks about foreign policy, and he explained exactly why World War I happened. And it was really, really insightful. Pretty much everything he'd say was insightful, including about how democracy and, though democracy is good, people use it. If politicians know that they could bribe the people with it, it creates a lot of problems, which we could see right now with the debt. I like The Brothers Karamazov, if you've read that, by Dostoevsky. It's a good, Russian novel. Let's see, 2 more. I'd recommend Case for Commonwealth Free Trade by Brent Cameron, that I've said a couple times. That's really good. And the last one, I'd recommend this book called Plain of Snakes. And these are just books I've read recently, but it's about Mexico.
Is it related to snakes on the plane at all?
Yeah, no. Yeah, exactly. No, it's about this guy who goes and travels throughout Mexico.
Okay.
It's really interesting. It's kind of like a travel book, but kind of not. It's kind of him just hanging out down there.
So you obviously read quite a range of selection of books, quite beefy books. Do you have time for any TV or films? Do you watch any of that?
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Laurence is probably going to ask if you watch The Crown, so I'll just jump the gun and ask it myself.
I did watch The Crown. I liked the first 2 seasons. I didn't like I didn't like the latest seasons. I mean, obviously they don't like the monarchy. They especially don't like Margaret Thatcher, so that's pretty clear. But it's well done. I thought Claire Foy was an amazing Queen Elizabeth. The next Olivia Colman was okay. Not she's a great actress, but that was a little. It was more of a character than I think Claire Foy's. Whoever played Prince Philip in that first one was great. So I do like The Crown, but I didn't really like the latest ones. In terms of Netflix, older shows, but Breaking Bad. I'm from Albuquerque originally. Yeah. That's my hometown right there.
Breaking Bad's fantastic.
Yeah, I liked Mad Men. Was very good. I'm watching Sopranos right now, the original one. That's very good. Let's see. I liked Downton Abbey. I liked Baptiste is pretty good. Let's see what other, because Grantchester was pretty good. Poldark was pretty good. Seen a few things.
You do quite a bit. You said you don't have much spare time, but it sounds like you got time for some books and time for some quite big shows, big series. Then.
This is these are stuff. These are not all things I've watched yesterday or read yesterday. But,
I do think the Americans are better at making sort of TV shows and things, especially like crime dramas and things like that. You can't really
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah,
that was a controversial remark, wasn't it?
There are some good English ones, don't get me wrong. Yeah. I'll get the haters now, but I think the Americans they're much more of a bigger production, aren't they? The American ones, I think.
A lot more money in American TV shows.
More money. They have a lot more money.
I mean, if you're on a popular sitcom, just one actor alone could be about, I think it's $1 million or so getting paid per episodes in the latest series, especially in The Big Bang Theory. I think they're getting $1 million an episode. So
and
there's a lot of money in American TV.
Oh, like Seinfeld was one of my favorite sitcom back in the day. That and Portlandia, but both of those
now on Netflix actually.
Seinfeld both good. But both Seinfeld and Portlandia, especially Seinfeld. Gosh, those guys were making millions. This is 20 plus years ago. Could you imagine how much they make now?
It's a lot. This brings us on to our very last question.
I don't know if you've seen the podcast before.
He said he's seen it many times.
Wow.
And in fact, he's very nice about it as well.
Do you like Marmite, basically?
You must have known you're going to get asked it.
Yeah, I know. I thought about. I don't know whether I've ever eaten it.
Have you never had it?
I don't think I have. I was trying to think about it. How
can you come to England and not have this perfect delicacy?
When I go to England, there are two things I like to get in England. I like to get the beer, which is great because you don't really have much beer like it in the United States. We have good IPAs and stuff, but we don't have the bitters, basically. And I do love getting bread and Indian food. And chips and food. But Marmite.
You come to England to get Indian food.
Well, the Indian food's really good, and Marmite. I guess maybe I could have had it. I'm trying to think. No, I don't think I've ever had a reason to.
Twizzlers.
Twiglets. Have you ever had Twiglets?
No.
Oh wow!
I'm getting so desperate now. I'm thinking if people do like Twiglets, I'll class it as like a Marmite. I think. I'm getting quite desperate now.
I've never had Vegemite either, though. I've never had Vegemite.
We've never had someone say they haven't had it. So that's.
I could have lied.
Don't know where to go from here.
I've had it.
yeah. Just say you don't like it. That would help me out a lot.
We'll have to have him back on, and between now and then, you'll have to try it.
You have to try it.
I'll find it on Amazon or something and order it here.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Obviously, we've had some technical issues, so thank you so much for sticking around.
Oh, thank you for having me on. It was great. I really enjoyed it.
It's been fantastic. Thank you very much.
All right. Cheers, guys.
Welcome back. That was a great interview.
Yeah.
Thoroughly enjoyed talking to him. So that brings us, of course, we're going to carry on the subject of AUKUS by talking about, what is it we're talking about, Simon?
Yeah, so I've been asked to speak to you about the Integrated Security Review. Ooh. So with the recent announcement of AUKUS, a deal to provide... What's so funny about that?
Just so he said, I've been asked to...
Yeah.
We brought him on as an expert in this field.
Is he going to talk about this every week?
Just
he's
integrated security.
He's
That's
an expert
it.
in various fields.
Right.
You guys. I was talking to the wrong camera. Then there's a camera to my right. So
We have done this before.
you guys are in for a treat. This guy's he knows his stuff.
I've literally read a book.
He's read a book.
No, so with the recent announcement of AUKUS, which was a deal to build some nuclear-powered submarines for the Australians.
Yes.
It sort of really brings to light what Boris Johnson has described as global Britain.
What is Global Britain?
Well, so far, I mean, really, it's been a bunch of platitudes from our Prime Minister Boris Johnson. But last March, we had the publication of the Integrated Security View, which was the first concrete attempt to try and define what global Britain means. So, in relation to AUKUS, it's stated by 2030 that the UK will be deeply engaged in the Indo-Pacific region as the European partner with the broadest, most integrated presence to foster mutually beneficial trade, security values.
Okay.
And so whilst it recognised that Russia was the greatest threat to UK interests, it realised that the need for what it calls an Indo-Pacific tilt.
So it still acknowledges that China is a threat.
So yeah, it's really saying that over the last few decades, we've perhaps concentrated too much on the Atlantic and Europe, Russia, and not enough in the Indo-Pacific.
rise, yeah.
India, China, South China Sea, Australia, New Zealand. So what it brings about is £24 billion extra in the defence budget over the next 4 years.
Wow.
I believe we'll be spending about 2.2% of our GDP on defence,
That's
which
a
is
decent amount.
more than the NATO 2% requirement. So
Yep.
if Trump was still the president, he'd be
Relatively
pleased. Happy.
Yep.
£80 billion over the next 4 years on defence procurement.
Wow.
So this is, tanks, planes, ships. It's bringing about an offensive space capability.
Yep.
So currently, military and civilian satellites are quite vulnerable. Britain has recently been.
Is that that's obviously why the UK is investing towards being able to launch our own spacecrafts.
Yes, yeah. In fact, the UK Space Agency, which is headquartered in Swindon.
We have a space agency, do we, in the UK?
We do, yeah. So David Cameron, we paid into the European Space Agency, but I believe it was in the early years of the Cameron government established a UK Space Agency, and I can't remember the figures, but it's now worth. The space sector is worth billions of pounds to the UK economy.
Yeah.
It's growing.
It's very important.
Huge
What people
percent.
don't realize, they think it's quite sci-fi to say like you could be having problems with wars, with taking down satellites and stuff. It's very real. It is a possibility, and it is a serious threat. Like so much of our day-to-day lives revolve around satellites.
Yeah, we use them for everything. For our phones, GPS, quite literally, all of our communications. Yep. It's crucial. So we see Russia and China developing offensive space capabilities where they'll be able to shoot down our satellites.
Yes.
So it's really important that the UK starts to move into this sector and have both an offensive and a defensive capability. And with that as well, we see perhaps AUKUS is a great example of this, but the government's stated ambition is for the UK to become what it calls a technological superpower.
Okay.
So that means investing in key technologies of the future, such as AI. We saw the Chancellor Rishi Sunak discussing it at the party conference today, and other things like biotech. And they're investing, I think, £6 billion over the next 4 years. And the idea is that you create these new technologies and you share them with your strategic allies across the Indo-Pacific region. So the integrated review is a sort of attempt to bring together defence, foreign and trade policy, and international development.
So you're trying to tie it all in together. It's really focusing on how to protect the country. Yeah,
it's quite interesting. Really. For the first time, we've got a defence review, which is as much an industrial and trade strategy as it is a Defence Review. So interesting, in the document, the word army isn't mentioned once.
Okay.
To pay for
Is
these,
that concerning?
I think it brings about a
I'm
realization
personally concerned,
that in order to pay for these new capabilities in space and new ships that we're getting, you're going to have to cut back on your conventional armed forces.
Ooh, okay.
So I think it's called a Pathfinder force. The thinking is that we'll have a very small elite army that will go out. Special forces will expand.
Yeah.
Standing conventional army will decline. So I think,
because aren't we also seeing the world of hacking and drones and things like that? You probably don't
Cyber warfare.
cyber war as well, all that sort of thing, as you say, in the sea, and so you probably need less army now, don't you?
yeah, and for the first time, actually, Britain has stated it wants an offensive cyber warfare capability, which we haven't admitted before or aim to have. And there's a big part of the review is looking at, what is the arena of a future war.
Yeah.
And so it's I think the conventional army, I think the numbers are going to go down to just over 70,000, meaning in terms of reserves as well, we'll probably have about 100,000.
Okay.
So,
but it was the whole point is that they're going to be very, very well trained, and obviously the UK Army already is one of the best, well trained armies in the world.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think Winston Churchill invented the concept of the commandos. So the idea is that we're going to have very small elite forces that will go out, they'll train local forces, operate with them, and then withdraw. So it's sort of a recognition as the end of the long, protracted deployments such as Afghanistan. Simply put, Britain wouldn't be able to sustain the numbers of troops that it had placed in Afghanistan today. In the same way that our Navy couldn't deploy a task force anywhere near the size that we did in the Falklands War. So we see the carrier strike group in the Indo-Pacific at the moment.
Yep.
That's got a whole host of ships from other NATO countries
to bolster it.
Yeah, in fact, I think it's only got 12 British jets on there.
Oh, really?
Wow.
And it's got the Americans are on there as well to bring those numbers up.
So is that something we should be concerned about, or is that the whole point of AUKUS is that we're all getting together? Or should the UK, if we really want to be global Britain, should we really be bolstering our own navy and having more ships and having more jets on our carriers?
Yes, that's a really interesting question. I think.
Oh, thank you.
I think originally we were supposed to buy something like 150 of these F-35Bs. We're committed to buying more, but the government haven't said how many more they will have. But more broadly, have we seen the end of European countries deploying forces independently of their allies? I think we probably have. Europe is comparatively getting ever smaller on the global stage. Britain is a tiny country in comparison to the rising powers of India, China, the USA. So I think that it's facing reality. Britain is not going to be able to deploy.
It's not a superpower anymore.
We aren't. But we play to our strengths. We have a blue water navy, which means we can deploy forces anywhere in the world. We've got fantastic relationships in NATO. We've got a really well-trained force, so we can work together. And of course, now with our sort of relationships, I think the 20.
Sorry to cut you off, but Britain is more when it comes to any defense pacts with say the USA and Australia and stuff. We're more of the support. Obviously, we're a bit more supportive than Australia could be with their army and their navy, but we are the supporting role.
Yeah, we're not really leading the world in the way that we used to. That doesn't mean we can't assume a leadership role. So, for example, HMS Queen Elizabeth and HMS Prince of Wales, they're fantastically capable ships, and they will be at the centre of a carrier strike group. So it's about choosing where we invest, to strategically invest in emerging technologies, and then to work with our allies on shared objectives.
Nice. Does it have any shortcomings?
Well, as with any security review, there's always a sense of optimism in what they want to achieve. So I think it was the Public Accounts Committee estimated that there's between a 7 and 14 billion pound shortfall in the defence procurement budget.
Wow. What's that from?
So when, for example, our F-35 Lightning aircraft, they're built in America by Lockheed Martin. It's a huge international sort of operation to get. I think Italy, UK, USA, Canada, they're all buying these aircraft. And of course, as the value of the pound goes up and down, of course, that has huge knock-on effects in defence budgets.
Okay.
Also, the MOD historically terrible at drawing up contracts. So if you look at the Type 45 destroyers, cost overruns, delays. I think first started designing them in 1991. The first ship wasn't launched till 2006. Ended up costing £1 billion.
Is there concern that they could be getting outdated?
Yes, I mean they do have sort of continuous development programs, but I mean a naval ship lasts 30 years. But this is why, I mean, also with the national shipbuilding strategy, the whole
good. I promised the viewers and the listeners last time that you'd mention this.
Well, currently all warships in the Royal Navy have to be made in the UK. That's government policy. So support vessels, we're buying some of those from South Korea. It's really good. They're they can build ships far cheaper than we can. In the UK, warships have to be made in the UK. The problem is we've only really got one big defence contractor. BAE Systems is Britain's largest manufacturer, and that's sort of the merging of quite a few different companies. So they have a monopoly on shipbuilding. So they're all built on the Clyde. They all cost an absolute fortune. They all go massively over budget. The whole point of the national shipbuilding strategy is to take the modular design that they made the Type 45 destroyers with, and instead of building a ship in one place, they build it all over the UK.
Okay.
Move them all together and then stitch them together in one ship.
Is that not more expensive?
Well, it was first started, the first time we did it in the UK was the Type 45s, and it was done with the Queen Elizabeth aircraft carriers. So they're too big to build in one place. But actually, it works out a lot cheaper because you can use far more of our dockyards around the UK.
Yeah.
You bring competition. Instead of using one contractor, you can use 4, 5, 6 contractors.
Yep.
And also, defence is as much a job creation exercise. And sort of supporting strategic industries in the UK, so skills and scientific areas. So is much about that as actually building the finished ship. So
Queen Elizabeth recently embarked on her maiden voyage. The carrier did, didn't she?
She did. Sorry, I just had an image then of the Queen
Yeah,
herself rowing
yeah,
out.
the Queen.
Not sure if that's correct. I'm sure she's been somewhere before.
No, the aircraft carrier.
Right,
the aircraft carrier, of course.
Yeah,
Which
so
he just mentioned it. Okay.
this is part of that big NATO sort of international approach. So go to the South China Sea and try and stop the Chinese from taking international shipping lanes as their own.
Okay, so how does this all tie in with AUKUS then? Is
So,
this about making the UK like more influential when it comes to AUKUS agreements, or when it comes to, like, say, the CANZUK agreement? If with CANZUK does a defence pact, how does it tie in?
Yeah, so I mean, Boris Johnson, when defending or announcing AUKUS in the UK Parliament, had to defend a barrage of criticisms from the leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, when he would ask the question, what really does the UK get from this? The boats, submarines are boats, not ships. The boat's going to be built in Australia. It's a huge amount of it is really sharing the knowledge and the technologies. And so, but there will be some contracts to UK scientists. It will help sort of maintain the skills gap that you get in between renewing our nuclear program and the life of their boats. But ultimately, this has a far greater strategic value than any monetary value. So although there will be contracts with British companies, what we're really seeing.
So it's
now
not a
is-
direct. We won't see a direct benefit from it in the short term. We won't see a short term benefit, but long term.
Long term, it's a huge benefit. And if the whole point of the review is to try and integrate British sort of our trade, our politics, and our defence in with our key NATO allies.
Yes.
And particularly if you look at the Commonwealth countries, there are some key allies the government's really keen to work closer together with. So
We're very keen of the Commonwealth.
AUKUS is
That's the name.
Yeah.
it's both symbolic and it's sort of strategically significant.
So are there any other flaws? Any other shortcomings or anything like that?
Notably, I mean, AUKUS was a great achievement, and of course it was done alongside the USA, but over the last 10, 20 years, Britain's international footprint has declined. Our ministers travel less widely now than they did before, and our fantastic world-leading diplomatic service has endured successive budget cuts.
Okay.
So we're in a position where we need to make lots of new agreements, and the people who make those agreements are far less well-travelled and have far fewer resources.
Oh, I see.
to
I was
do that.
wondering what the flaw was where you're going with that. So the flaw is that they're not as experienced. They're not as.
Well, we have fewer of them. So, our diplomatic service stationed all over the world, that footprint has declined successively.
Okay.
And also, there's a slight sense of confusion as to really exactly what this aims to achieve. I mean, there's definitely the fingerprints of Dominic Cummings on this, and for
he was keen on cyber warfare.
He was indeed, and investing early in tech and
well, you don't want to be late to the tech, do you?
No,
being late. If they're shooting down your satellites and you're like, oh, we better start inventing something to stop this, it's too late.
Yeah, and Dominic Cummings was always very quick to argue that unlike most conservative governments, you should be investing, states should be taking a lot of the risk for the early investment in these technologies.
Okay.
So moving away from the sort of laissez-faire or market economics and having a more interventionist approach.
I see, yeah.
And so
instead of waiting for companies to get round to maybe invest in and researching, just get the state involved and straight away.
Yeah. So more like we saw with the COVID vaccine.
Yes.
The Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, the research and development was paid for by the British state, working with private companies.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So there's touch of confusion of is this a industrial strategy or is it a defence review? I'm sure there'll be a lot more conversation about that as it sort of unravels and we see the application of it.
But overall, it ties quite nicely in with AUKUS then.
It does. I mean, AUKUS, we can see the first sort of tangible applications of this defence review, and we can start to see what Boris Johnson means when he says global Britain.
Global Britain. And do you reckon this could help with pushing for a CANZUK agreement? Specifically, I guess in this instance, it's more CANZUK defence. So obviously we want to get these countries involved. And I think Ted mentioned about getting India involved as well. Is that a potential for the future?
I certainly hope so. I mean, the ambitions of the Integrated Defence Review are exactly in line with the sort of general movement towards a CANZUK agreement. I think Ted raised some really interesting concerns that are there with our membership of the EU. When you look at India, South Africa, these are definitely countries that Britain needs to work closer with. When it comes to freedom of movement of people, the problem when we were part of Europe is that you had the northern European economies sucking up the cheap labour and skills from the South and Eastern Europe. So you get a dual problem in Southern and Eastern Europe. You have a skill shortage where everyone's being moved up through, and in Northern Europe and Britain particularly, you have instead of investing in measures to improve productivity, that's supplemented with cheap labour, and we're seeing that with for example, the lorry driver shortage. Instead of paying a better wage, they the pushes to bring more European drivers over.
We've already got some. So obviously AUKUS is the first kind of defence agreement that we've got with the countries. We of course do have already the intelligence agreement, the Five Eyes, which is between Australia, Canada, New Zealand, UK, and USA. So this could be expanded alongside AUKUS. I think going forward, should we start looking at bringing India into this discussion? Like when does India start coming into these defence pacts?
Definitely. I mean, I can think of no better country than India to work with. In fact, I think really the question that should be asked is, does India really have much time for us? They're a rising superpower.
Yep.
They've got a really strong both a domestic and international agenda. And really Britain is a very small country with, to India, relatively little to offer. And if, as Ted mentioned, if we're not going to, for example, grant access for their students and greater flexibility of movement of people.
But in
India
the grand
aren't likely.
scheme of, obviously not just with the UK, but obviously with the USA, with Australia and New Zealand, could they come inside with them?
I really hope so. And of course, I think the big problem is that India will be one of the global superpowers, and will the Americans be willing to share?
Are we gonna? Are they gonna be willing to share? But obviously, they're much more friendly with us than say China is. Of course, they were very friendly with Donald Trump when Donald Trump went to visit. They're very pally with him. So obviously, what we don't want to happen, and is for it to be like another China. We want to keep them on our side, because obviously China were just allowed to keep growing and growing and just didn't pay any attention.
But India are the largest democracy in the world. There's over 1 billion people. They are not a third world country they used to be. They're an emerging superpower with a strong domestic culture that's independent of other Western countries.
Yeah. But that just brings us on nicely. I would just like to see an expansion of the Five Eyes and bring in AUKUS to bring in more countries together. But at the moment, AUKUS is more specifically about building the nuclear submarines for Australia than it is to do with the massive defence pact. But it's something we could see in the future.
It's the first step, isn't it?
It certainly is. And the Five Eyes could actually become the Six Eyes with an eye, with an actual country.
Do you want to explain what the Five Eyes are? Do you want to...
I've already done it. Maybe if you paid attention for once. I said it's Australia, Canada, New Zealand, UK, and United States.
How's that eyes though?
Eyes is in eyes. It's intelligence gathering.
Yeah.
So they got the Five Eyes looking out. Intelligence gathering.
So when you said eyes, I'm thinking, what the country eyes in there?